like any red pill guy, my eyes roll in the back of my head whenever somebody uses the term real man. But if I were to use that label, if I were to invest in the idea of what a real man is, I would say real men can say no.
Basically, I just wanted to reflect on our experiences and perspectives on chatting with men, being involved in our corner of the manosphere, so to speak, and sort of the evolution's probably the wrong word, but our chronology within those domains, and what we've learnt, how we saw things when we started compared to now, how we've grown, all that kind of shit.
Yeah, and I think there has been some element of evolution involved in this. There's definitely, I like the use of chronology better than just relying on evolution, but also there's been some evolving, I think, going on.
Yeah. I mean, just from my point of view, and I don't think really any guys within, say, MGTOW know this, but I've always been interested in the kind of social dynamics and the sort of gender issues since the early 90s, I think, ever since I read Dave Sims' essay called Tangent. And in the comic book field, that was an atomic bomb that got him really ostracized. And that was just kind of an atomic bomb of truth for me, and I didn't realize why people hated him so much. And he wrote it fictionally as well. So he basically wrote it in terms of like a male and female character, but people were so offended. And it wasn't direct like the things we're talking about today that are on the internet and YouTube and everything. And that was really me taking an intellectual and moral stance on the issue. I just remember starting to search for essays and information regarding these things, Then I started coming across essays and writing on Schopenhauer, and started getting into history and psychology and, the Stoics, and just sort of it expanded from there. And then in terms of, say, talking to guys within MGTOW, not many guys within the community now will realize I was talking to the guys right from the start. In the early 2000s, I was posting and involved chatting in the MGTOW, what is now called Nice Guys MGTOW Forum, but back then it was called Mancoat Forums. And this was this was around 2003, 2004. Facebook barely made a start, so there was no social media. There was just chat rooms. And I was there with these guys, and guys there who started MGTOW. In the forum, the administrator was a guy called Nice Guy, and there were guys there called Egghead, by the name of Egghead and Mechanized, and Zen Priest was actually there. A few people have mentioned him, some of us older guys who know the guy or have heard of his writings. He was a real wise, sage-like father figure that every time he spoke, everyone shut up.
A little measure of asshole to the guy, too. Which I can say I've known him for quite some time.
Yeah, I always envisaged him as a biker with a big beard. He didn't take any shit. He was set in his ways, but when he laid some kernels of truth, it was it kind of speared you, and people really listened to him. So I was chatting with those guys, and around the same time, a few of the guys actually got together in person. This was in Europe. Two guys called Mikio and Ragnar and somebody else. They actually got together and they formulated the road sign with MGTOW symbol, and they formulated the acronym, what it stood for, and it was chatted about in these forums. But the first time it appeared was in the website or forum Men for Justice. That didn't last long, but that was the first time MGTOW appeared. But then it migrated back to Nice Guys Forum, which is now called Nice Guys MGTOW Forum. And yeah, that's how it began. So I was from the early 90s chatting online, and then I actually was there for around the gestation period of what MGTOW was. And it was pretty much based around male sovereignty, male freedom, and it wasn't everything it's evolved into now. Just as a little preamble, that's where I came from. So you can understand sometimes in my videos where I kind of get annoyed at how it's been prostituted.
Oh, yeah. And keep in mind, too, that back in the day, I get a lot of this from Peter Wright, who was back there with that group, too. And I was certainly back on Sock Men and Sock Women, which were the old Yahoo forums, talking with people like Zen Priest and others, Angry Harry back then.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
the
yeah,
guy,
yeah.
the guys that started all that originally identified as MRAs. And the story goes that what happened was that they couldn't keep a group cohesive. Men
Mm,
kept leaving. And they started to say, yeah, we try to get this thing together, but everybody's going their own way.
yeah, which is fine, I guess. I mean, that's the whole precept of it. And even I think it was Zen Priest. He said because he was involved with a lot of men's help groups, and he was helping men long before that in the 90s, if my memory serves me. So he came
Oh, yeah.
from different men's groups, and when we were chatting in the forums, he said the formulation of MGTOW, he said it was the first thing he could actually see as potentially working because it was the only thing that was non-hierarchical. He said it was the only self-sustaining men's philosophy that he thought could, last the distance, simply because it was a perspective and a philosophy rather than a dogma or a politic or anything like that. But having come from the birth of it, and only in the last couple of years thrown my hat in terms of like an older guy with some experience in having this philosophy in my head and living it, and living by its values in a lot of ways, not just talking about it. It's just interesting. I just wanted to know how you came to say the MRA and all the things you're kind of known for.
Well, it started for me like it does with a lot of MRAs with Warren Farrell's book, The Myth of Male Power, which was just sort of one of those epiphanies, a light coming on moment. I read the book overnight. I started in an afternoon and I was still reading at 6 a.m. the next morning. Um, and it was one of those revelatory moments where I was going one direction until I read this book. And then I had an entirely different worldview.
Mm.
And I started digging, this was in 93, and there really wasn't much of an internet to speak of. Um, Even that early on, there wasn't much to do with it, but I set on a tangent of writing letters to editors, submitting articles. Every once in a while, I got something published. But once the discussion groups started on Yahoo, I found a group of about 12 men there. One was Angry Harry and the other was Zed, or Zen Priest,
Mm.
as you referred to him, and a group of others. And we sat around for hours talking to each other through these low-tech forums, thinking, if there was 20 people in a circle, that was a lot.
Mm.
And that's where I sort of got exposed. I have a sort of a funny story. Zed was a no, I assume he's still alive. I haven't heard from him in quite a while. But he certainly was a really no nonsense kind of guy. I came into a forum, of course, thought I knew everything and laid out a couple of facts for Zed, which he disassembled like he was doing it with one hand and doing brain surgery with the other, laughing the whole time. And that eventually struck up quite a friendship for a long time. But I got involved through that and sort of did what the guys you were talking about. I went my own way. I felt like that there was more to it than I saw a lot of guys talking about never get married, which I agree with and always agreed with.
Mm.
But I thought there was more to discuss than this. And sometimes coming from my perspective, that sort of dialogue wasn't welcome,
Mm.
to be honest. Um, and that's okay. I went out and sort of created my own forum. I started going around to a place called antimisandry.com. I don't know if you remember them.
No, no.
They were internet forum that was very robust for quite some time. It petered out. Then I became the editor-in-chief of Men's News Daily back in its heyday when it was a very high-profile website, and sort of rocked the boat there with the conservatives that were there. What the men's movement, aside from the venues that you're talking about, but what the more mainstream men's movement, if we can use that word, was really a bunch of conservative white knights that wanted to make the plantation healthy again.
Yeah. And it's still largely there.
Well, I don't know. If that's largely there, I don't know where it is. Some people will, I know some guys will say that it's in my work, although I can't imagine where they're getting that. I've been vehemently anti-marriage the whole time.
Well, I would say it's precisely in them. They're projecting their fears onto you.
Yeah. But in terms of MRAs wanting to make the plantation right again, I think that's become an urban myth within some portions of the MGTOW community. I've asked for proof of that, and every time I do, those guys quickly disappear and end the conversation. But I've seen a lot of change in this. We chatted briefly before we started this discussion about evolution, and I've seen, I think, a lot of changes over the past 15 years. Mainly growth.
In what ways do you see?
Well, I think there's been a lot of just sheer growth in numbers. I think MGTOW, red pill, whatever you want to call it, just sort of peeling back the denial about hypergamy, about gynocentrism, all these things. That mentality has expanded greatly, and the understanding, a more in-depth understanding of things like gynocentrism and hypergamy has also become much more part of the common narrative. We're even starting to see, people in the mainstream. I saw Michelle Malkin the other night ripping to shreds the feminist myth that only 2% of false allegation or 2% of allegations are false, of sexual assault allegations. And she absolutely eviscerated it, which 10 years ago would not have happened from a mainstream conservative thinker. It just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it amazes me sometimes. I understand people have biases, the easiest one being if you're a married man who loves his family and, loves his kids and you love the construct, you don't really want to face the objective negatives that you could see from someone, say myself, if I were to discuss openly, look, it's all good for you, but X, Y, and Z is the reason why I just can't. And it forces them to confront their biases and they'll defend it. And it might actually objectively be true, but I can understand that. I'm always amazed that you present data in front of them, you present the truth from various facets, from statistics to data to marriage trends to how many people do you know who were divorced versus how many people are happily married and all of this stuff. And the overwhelming majority of the weight of all that points more in your direction. And you're not wanting to defeat them. You're just saying, can you at least throw me an olive branch and agree that this is real? And they just no, I refuse to believe it. It's like, it's not you refuse to believe it. Is it true? And they don't want to. And that's what kind of amazes me. But I suppose we're in an age of feeling instead of intellect. So.
Well, absolutely. And we see that on the conservative side almost as much as we do on the left. But, I see the same thing, and I'll be the first to admit, I really truly believe that the nuclear family with marriage at the center of it has been the core of our social stability for a long, long time. I don't think there's any denying that. Those things are true, but modern realities still say that that marriage is a fool's errand for a man. That doesn't mean I think less of the institution as it perhaps could be or should be, but it's not that way. And we're not aimed toward that happening. The only sane thing for a man to do at this point, in my opinion, is to avoid the institution altogether. And we're not going to make it better anytime soon.
Yeah, sure. And I would agree. Like I even say in my videos, no matter, I know, the lifestyle I want, I know my ethics and virtues, but I completely admit that the safest way to raise a healthy child is in a secure household with the male and female at the head. And statistics prove it. How thousands of years of evolution proves it. And only now in this speck of time we're living in now, the feminist left, whatever you want to call it, the social justice crowd's like, no, let's burn history. We're starting from here, and we've got fanciful theories why this should work, and there's every reason it should work because of my biases. It's like, you can test those in your own life, but don't force the rest of society to run on your experiment. It's kind of fun. And as we go on, I just want to quickly say to the people listening, and it's stupid that I almost have to be compelled to say this and wrap cotton wool and smelling salts around this conversation, but Paul and I are just going to be describing our own experiences of the manosphere and what we've experienced and what we see. It's not law, it's not prescriptive. So think of it as eavesdropping between two guys having a beer, okay? So I just thought I'd get that out of the way, even though I hate doing it.
That's a good, I'm glad you phrased it that way. And yeah, you shouldn't have to, but you do have to, and I'm glad you did.
Yeah, it's funny because one of my most popular videos is one in which right from the beginning, the intro was in fact saying, look, if you're a woman who takes responsibility and you've got your head screwed on properly and you don't take advantage of people and you don't expect a free ride, blah, blah. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said, I fully respect you. Hats off. I'm talking about the lazy other kind of, say, left feminist social justice warrior. So I laid that out right from the beginning in the first few, say, 10 to 15 seconds. And no one cares. But yeah, you have to kind of do it. Then you can easily in the comments section say, listen to the start of the video.
Right. Which they won't do.
I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things in terms of when you, not just when you started, because that was kind of probably like me, you're starting to form the ideas, get to know yourself in relation to them, and then take a stand in all that in yourself. From when you started to kind of know the truth of things in terms of like social relations, how society was fucking up compared to what you knew was the corrective or the better way, and now where you are, because I admit I know you mainly for your Ear for Men channel, which is largely what I do. I tend to talk one-on-one with a guy, right. Whereas MRA, from what I glean, and I haven't really gone into the site much and followed it, seems to be more trying to help men politically, like in a broader sense, not in the one-on-one. Would that be a fair characterization?
Actually, no. I mean, and again, to qualify this, I'm talking from my experience and from the work that's been done at AVFM over the past 10 years. Mm-hmm. And there certainly are. There's groups like SAVE out there that are trying to get a family violence bill to replace VAWA. There's Warren Farrell's trying to do the White House Commission on Boys and Men. And I largely don't have anything to do with any of that shit. And interestingly enough, both of those, SAVE and Warren Farrell, are not people that will identify as MRAs. Mm. And I don't know anybody that identifies with MRAs that is actually, as an MRA, that's actually doing political work. At AVFM, we've never endorsed a politician. We have never tried to push a bill or a law or anything of that sort. We're not involved with those things. The guys at NCFM, the National Coalition for Men, fine outfit, great people. They won't identify as MRAs. I got an award from them one year, and they damn near had to do it in secret because their board was against giving it to me. And, well, so there are those groups out there that are working, and there's shared parenting groups, and those people won't identify as MRAs. So when people say MRAs are about doing political work or trying to get the plantation fit for Toby to go back on and tote that barge, they're absolutely misinformed in my experience. We've never been engaged in any of that stuff. Our whole mission, our whole idea for right now, we're focused on men's mental health, but for years, our tagline was called Changing the Cultural Narrative. And all we wanted to do was to have this provocative public discussion that brought men into the fold, to hear about a way of viewing themselves that's different than the world wants to prescribe for them. And that is it from top to bottom, end to end, alpha to omega. That's all we've been about. And so it always sort of tickles me when MGTOW come into when some MGTOW, and I need to qualify that. A lot of people at AVFM are MGTOW and identify as such. But on YouTube, there's some MGTOW that come in and blurt absolute nonsense about AVFM wants to get the plantation suitable for men, or to get men back on the plantation. Nothing could be further from the truth. And of course, like I said, these are the same guys that you say, oh yeah, well, show me a little proof of that. Can you point me to an article or anything that's evidence of that? And then of course you never hear back from them after that. It's just something on the rumor mill out there that seems to have been given a life of its own. But our work is always, as MRAs, has been about spreading red pills. That's the only thing I'm interested in doing, and is actually the only thing I was ever interested in doing.
That's interesting. That's like the spreading of red pill knowledge as regards to men, in relation to the gynocentric culture we're living in, is pretty much all I'm interested in. Or, I might do it from more of a conversational, philosophical bent, because I really think the power lies in having a man think independently, strongly, and confidently, rather than giving him confidence slogans that he can wear as a T-shirt, and he just keeps piling on those T-shirts. That doesn't develop any real strength. So, a lot of times I find myself even within the MGTOW community, and again, want to remind people, I was involved in MGTOW, or talking to those guys when it was birthed.
I know the story you're told is exactly true.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's been sort of told in that sort of chronology, but for anyone caring to check on where MGTOW was actually birthed, they'll find it's true. But to me, it was always about autonomy, sovereignty, and everyone tended to have a libertarian bent. Other than that, there was don't get married, don't have kids if you can help it, only because it wasn't like a rule. It was like, that's a landmine, just be careful of that. Aside from that, it was just splashing cold water on your face, and for the first time being able to see clearly and wake up. And we had people on the forums, whether they were married guys, traditionalists, like it was basically men thinking rationally and trying to tussle with things that they always thought were true, that they had to now admit. That's why the fuck they're on the forum in the first place. Wherever you're from, that's why you're here talking to these people. You have to admit that these things are starting to taste more real than the things you were butting your head up against. So for me, if we want to talk about, from my subjective point of view, not objective, subjective point of view of what going your own way and being independent means to me, and what disappoints me in the groups I talk in, and the people I talk with, they don't disappoint me. It's the commenters that proclaim to be in the same tribe or in the same community. And I recognize that they might be young, they might still be finding their own way, because that's one thing people forget is going your own way is actually finding your own way. That means thinking your own way, not following. And so I can kind of forgive them until they get to a point of trashing the elders, doxing elders, trying to ruin elders because their dream is being sort of spotlighted. We're making you look at your mother and father objectively and testing under your values whether or not you do love them in the same way, whether you do love Pumpkin in the same way, whether you still see her or marriage or a job or the system or your parents, or do you honestly see it in the same way? You might still love them, but it might be tempered with a bit of reality, and I think that's healthy. But there's a lot of married guys that with anonymous names frequent my channel too, and they've got great insights. Mm-hmm. And the guys that trash them tell them you shouldn't be here because you're married. I keep thinking, guys, you're missing an opportunity of men on the front line telling you day to day why they agree with men going their own way, and you want to make an enemy of them. What is wrong with you?
I think we can say what's wrong with them in one word: is fatherlessness. I think that population of guys, and I see them too all the time. They occasionally come to the comments at AVFM. They even more than occasionally come to the comments on my videos with, telling guys they don't belong because they're married, as though they're the fucking arbiter of who belongs where on my channel. There is a feral sort of quality to these guys, and I don't mean that in a good way. And I feel for them. I do. I feel for them because I don't think they've ever known positive masculinity. Most of these guys had their fathers removed from the home and then spent the next several years listening to their mothers trash their fathers while simultaneously telling those young men things like, "You're just like your father," right after she trashes him to no end. So they're getting it from all ends, but they don't have any kind of positive masculinity in their lives. They don't have an influence of a father, and they end up unprincipled, angry, lashing out at everything, and trying desperately to form a club. I mean, that's what unfortunately happens to young men. This is how they end up in gangs when their fathers are gone. They're trying desperately to belong to something. And the guys in MGTOW that are trying to make it this club that you need to, meet their litmus tests, their qualifications to belong to, are simply speaking to their own loneliness and their own lack of direction, because nobody that's self-assured needs to belong to a club.
Yeah, and to be fair to any younger guys listening, to sort of, everyone takes time to get to levels of self-assuredness. It's not like a light switch. No matter, I know when you're in pain, you want it to be like a light switch. Give me the red pill and now I'm a lion. But it made me think of something, reflect on something that you just said in terms of the fatherlessness. If you've just seen females and your mother's a goddess, a living god, and she's telling you the men are shit, by inference, if not directly, you're shit, and you don't even know what a man is and don't know what masculinity is. I just thought it makes perfect sense why guys grow up trying to find any kind of masculinity or manliness, which is all about how they can fit into the world as a male because they're not female. It's like, how can I fit in? And the only way that they can actually latch onto how can I be a man, because their whole lives has been devoid of any kind of masculinity or a father figure, is it's latching onto being a man like a superhero or a mythical figure, because you actually haven't been shown by a flesh and blood normal father, grandfather. And so they go into these forums putting on capes and red tights and beating their chest and doing the whole Iron John thing. And to me, it speaks a lot to the anger that's in the comment section. Whereas, like, I find comfort in finding my own kind of loose community and tribe of individual men. You know, I'm not trying to find a group with people I talk to. So nobody is a copy of me in any way, whether it's you or Stardust or TFM or DDJ or, you know, Coltane or anybody. Everyone's vastly different, but we can all talk rationally in the same direction and agree upon certain things and tussle with ideas and and expand our knowledge and go, I don't agree with that. And then you have to reflect on your own presuppositions. And what happens is either it strengthens your point of view because you've reflected. And as an example, I'll say, Paul's point of view, it seems more like a load of shit now, and I've strengthened my own point of view. Or if you say something that challenges me and it really sounds like 1 + 1 = 2, I have to throw out the other, and that's part of growth. So these young guys, it just made me think, no wonder they come onto the forums like superheroes, because it's the only kind of cartoonish, clownish way that they think they can be tough guys. They actually don't know the meaning of strength in a lot of ways. Strength is very superhero-ish.
Well, I think you hit on something really important there too, Human, when you talk about because what you're describing with 1 and 1 = 2, you're talking about intellectual honesty. And that is something that I think fathers give to their sons. They set standards for them. Fathers demand intellectual honesty from their sons. And that becomes a standard. And what you can see in all these guys, and it's not just the guys in the comments, you know, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I had one limited interaction with TFM, and he came across as totally and completely intellectually dishonest. And interestingly enough, he's one of the guys out there that trashes me in my work and I can't even say I know exactly what he said, because people say TFM was trashing you. I don't go listen to it. But the one exchange I had with him, it took him about 30 seconds to become dishonest. And I think that is father absence in his life. I really believe that if he'd been given a shot with a decent father, that we probably could have found some common ground. But this is one of the consequences, because we allowed feminists, they set out in the 60s and 70s to destroy the family, and we fucking let them do it. It happened.
My interaction, say, with TFM has always been, we can talk about the facts, and my experience with him has always been a live and let live attitude. Whereas where I kind of have a problem is where someone is very dogmatic, and if I don't believe what they believe, they start to pile on me and try and shame me and make me look like a fool. And I really...
Let me be clear about one thing, though. I don't want to get too far afield before I say this. I'm not saying at all that I disagree. I agree with, I've listened to a few TFM videos. I thought some of them were really good, and I agree with a lot of that material. I think he serves a valuable purpose out there. I was just talking about more on a personal level, reflecting the part of the conversation we were trying to address with angry young men.
Yeah, for me, I don't care so much if someone disagrees with me. It's when emotion starts to come into it and they want to bury me because they're offended at ideas. If I offend you personally and attack you personally, that's different. But if I offend or attack your ideas, I don't care, because it's not personal. Like, if you believe in your ideas, you should not be afraid of them being questioned. In the same way as I say, if someone kind of said, oh, you don't love your father, I would laugh. I wouldn't get angry at him. I would laugh, because I know it to be true. For me, the anger resides in what you're still fighting against. You're pushing and pulling between the truth and falsity. Going back to what I described as sort of my little disappointments in the comment section and guys who are angry, what sort of things have you seen as little disappointments in, whether it's the MRA or AVFM or like in terms of that chronology, you know, what it might have been like and what the state of that domain is now?
Well, God, Boy, I could go over a list of disappointment. Um,
People think, just before you go on, people think that because we're sort of known in a small fashion that we're perfect and that the people we speak to are perfect and we're this like perfect religion that can't be. It's just a kind of an evolution of thought and guys talking. So I am different to who I was 5 years ago, and I've been incorrect about a lot of things, and I'll be incorrect and refining my position in the next 5 years too. But I doubt whether my perspective is going to change 180 degrees. But yeah, go ahead anyway. I just wanted to throw that in.
So are you asking me about personal disappointments or observations in what's happening with the community of red pill men, that sort of thing, or?
First off, say the community, and then just generally, anything that pops up to mind, because I don't want to get specific. I just want to talk. I don't want to get into dissecting the forensics, because I think that those kind of discussions kind of get lost.
I think one thing I disagree with. I don't know who thinks you're perfect, but my audience tells me when I screw up all the time. They don't hesitate. They tell me I screw up when I don't think I've screwed up, and certainly when I have. Disappointments. I think really part of the disappointment is in me being disappointed about something that I shouldn't be disappointed in. It makes me sad to see so many young men stuck in intractable anger and distrust. I wish that I didn't see that as much as I did. And you see it reflected in guys that say all women are bitches and whores and, fucking thieves and liars and pieces of shit and men are decent and wonderful.
Yeah. Which,
of course, is crazy talk, but it's born of anger. And I wish I was more understanding of that anger than I am sometimes. A lot of times I am understanding of it. I get it. And I know these guys need to vent. They may need to vent for years. Some of them have had very long knives stuck in their backs. Some of them's lives have been nearly eviscerated by sick mothers, by crazy exes. You know the routine. You hear it all the time. And so, but still, I know the answer in the end isn't in the anger. The anger is just a phase to go through. It's a part of the process of grief that needs to happen. But sometimes I do get tired of hearing it. And that's a shortcoming in me because, the guy that's venting that anger, it isn't new or it isn't old hat to him. He's not tired of it. He's still needing to vent. And so it comes to a line where I have to monitor myself more than anything else.
I sort of see that too, where a lot of guys, they miss my earlier style videos where I was admittedly being theatrical while delivering a point of view, but I was really... See, that's the thing that happens when you assume. When you learn stuff like this, especially the red pill, is you come to the truth by apophatic process. That is, you realize what's true by what's not. So whereas later on, you go your own way by a cataphatic process where you start to go somewhere, like latch onto what's right, what's real, what's my next step. And the initial videos for me, I thought were self-evident, like, here's what's bullshit, here's how women can act, isn't it laughably true? But a lot of guys get stuck in it's their fault. They're pointing outside of themselves. And that wasn't my point. My point was, I know what's true, and I know my values now in relation to what's not true, whereas a lot of guys just point to what's not true, and the internal is just empty. So it's just safe to kind of sit out here throwing mud at things. And I think a lot of that comes out in the comments section. And interestingly enough, it's some of the guys that produce content, they peter out really quickly because the anger of throwing mud, you can't sustain that for very long. And the guys that kind of will shame other men, for kind of being weak because you're not tough in that way anymore. You're not continually slinging mud at women. And I'll do that when it's warranted, because women can be villains just like men can be villains. And when someone's acting like a villain, or a segment of society is acting like a villain, you point it out. You don't pretend it's nothing because you don't want to offend. But for me, it's just as important to be cataphatic in the process of like your evolution. Like, look at, what do I want to do now? How do I want to make my life better? Your life's not better sitting in one place and opposing an army from your gates. You know, you're just sitting, defending yourself all the time and knocking back the hordes. And I just don't think that's a life well spent, and you just lose energy doing that. Sorry, I got off topic a bit, but
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because it really reminded me of another way to answer your question. In terms of disappointments, what I wished I saw more from the content producers of red pill material, be it MGTOW or MRA or whatever, I get to where I hate these labels, but so I just tend to stick with red pill because it's a bigger blanket. To cover more area. But what I wish I saw was exactly what you talked about. I wish I saw more discussion of values. It's been my personal experience is that values are healing, they're redemptive, they are an effective way to move past grief, to take ownership of your life. If your values is accountability, if that's among your values. And that's why I've labeled my brand of counseling a values-centered approach, because I believe that men are unique in their ability to live by a set of values, if they're taught that. And of course, that's one of the greatest losses with fatherlessness, is that those values don't get taught. And I mean, at the risk of going back and sounding like one of the angry guys that I was just complaining about, they're certainly not going to get values from the average woman in this culture. And I don't say that to trash women. I just say that to point to the fact that this society does not expect women to have agency, therefore it doesn't expect them to have values. That's why they get to act with impunity for what is real poor values in the male world. But I wish I saw more of these content producers leading men toward their own values as a solution. And I'm sort of disappointed that I don't see more than that. But of course, that's Paul sitting up in his chair pointing at what he thinks ought to be right in the world. And
Well, that's exactly the thing. Like, exactly what you said. Like, you just displayed some humility in terms of you reflected, and there's not much of that. There's certainly not much of that in gynocentrism. There's nothing at all. But it's disappointing to see it among men who are trying to be inclusive. And that kind of reflection, you did it very quickly, where you could sort of see what you were saying and how you might be doing or might not be doing the same thing, and you're open to sort of all that. So many guys are closed because they don't have values, and so where all your values are given to you by, like you said, women, being raised from when you're young to when you're an adult, where all your values are female centered, and you're a piece of shit that needs to just keep raising the bar, and women will never be happy until you become, I don't know, Christian Grey or George Clooney or somebody.
Well, yeah, the only value you're allowed to have with a lot of these women is making women happy. That's the value.
Aside from the words I don't care or no towards women, a very easy one is just to sort of remind yourself when you're in that tight pickle, because I've been there, I'm sure most guys have when they're younger with women. A woman will instill what she wants from you, and men's first reaction is to go, oh shit, I feel uncomfortable, but I better be agreeable. But that uncomfortable feeling is exactly your body telling you need to stand up and listen to what you want, your values. And it's just so easy when you get older and to say, hang on, what about what I want? There's nothing wrong with what I want and what my values are. defending yourself when you feel uncomfortable, and rather than submitting, and then later on getting angry at women, you're actually angry at yourself subconsciously because you submitted. You're not angry at the woman because a woman will act like a woman. It's like you said, the men before us, they laid the foundations for feminism to just keep going unchecked. In a proximal, smaller way, in a man's bubble that is his own life, he does that with women. So you can't just get angry at the system for allowing feminism to run rampant. When you look at it, the same men that really get angry at the so-called boogeyman of feminism also display the same characteristics in their own life. You know, they're allowing the feminist in the woman just to have whatever she wants too, and they say yes to everything she wants. So I think feminism's a scapegoat. I used to be an anti-feminist in the 90s and early 2000s. I'm not anymore.
I think you can take that into the personal level too. I mean, I did a talk on this once, and I used my own bad marriage as an example. That, you know, I complained for a good long while toward the end of my marriage and after the divorce of what a cheating, conniving, no good bitch my ex was. And she was a cheating, conniving, no good bitch that gave me every indication to know that about her from the day I met her, and I chose to ignore it. That, I think, in terms of values, is another thing that men can learn in that their own agency, their own accountability will save them from a lot of grief. The fact of the matter is, if I had taken responsibility for what I was able to see at the beginning of the relationship, the end wouldn't have been near as expensive or painful as it was. But that was on me.
Yeah, and there's something liberating believing that the buck stops with you. Like you're not blaming anyone else anymore. Unless, you know, out of nowhere, you can objectively see you're standing in the street, someone drives by and throws a brick at your head. You didn't see it coming. But for most men, you ask them after their horror stories or their wives, there's virtually none that didn't see it coming. You know, you ask them about their ex-chickie poo's personality and how she acted and how she was treating him, and it's no real big shock that she did what she did and she acted the way she acted afterwards.
Absolutely right.
And to me, as though, like you said, now the difference is if I date or go out with a woman, I very, very doubt knowing female nature, knowing myself, more importantly, in relation. I don't think I'll have that anger like I did in my 20s, where I was, you know, the fact that I was anti-feminist, which is kind of anti-female in a way, back then, was that I was ashamed subconsciously at allowing it to happen to me, at never saying no. I was a person that said yes to keep Pumpkin smiling all the time and, you know, happy wife, happy life, even though I wasn't married to her. So I think, the buck stops with you.
You were a normally trained man.
Yeah, look.
Because that is how we train men.
Well, yeah. I mean, my father's a quiet guy. So he never gave me any hard lessons, although he's a great guy. So I kind of was given values by, you know, and I love my mother and father, but I didn't really get a lot of masculine teaching in my life. So I kind of learnt it looking for masculine figures in my 20s and early 30s by absorbing authors and, you know, people experienced and stuff like that. So I kind of grew into what I knew was true, and I didn't get what was true by mentorship from, say, the kind of fathers, you know, that we'd point to in yesteryear. But still love my father, but I didn't get that direct teaching. Because let's face it, like, I think in a lot of ways I am like my father. I'm very individualistic, so I go off and do my own thing and I need my own time. I realize that me and him have that in common, so it wasn't an intentional thing, but the result was me looking for mentorship in certain parts of masculinity and being taught about women and reality in terms of social dynamics by the world. And of course, it can be dangerous, although I didn't really step in on any big minefields, because even when I didn't really know my values clearly, I kind of knew what scared the shit out of me, what lines I wouldn't cross. And that was getting a woman pregnant before I knew I wanted to have a baby. That is a point of no return. So points of no return for me, they're my values.
Yep, absolutely right. It takes time to get there, though. It really does.
Yeah, and a lot of these guys in comment sections that are so risk averse, I'm all for recoverable risk. Whereas a lot of guys just concentrate on complete safety, where there's no noise, there's no light, there's no color, there's no sound, and it's complete safety. And, you know, some people might get off on that. But for me, my safety was that I only set limits where there were points of no return, rational ones. And there's a reason why the guys who started MGTOW said, you know, the only real, you don't want to call them rules, but biggest rational deterrents are don't get married, because that's not a recoverable risk.
Right.
When more than half of marriages end and women initiate 2/3 of the divorces, you're not beating the casino. I don't care how good you play cards, how good you think you can game the system. It's rigged. Like you have to be lucky.
The house wins, my friend. It does.
And men don't chart a course on luck. They can chart a course on adventure, but if they know that they can stand by their own effort, and more than likely their own effort, skill, resources and intelligence and sort of stoic resolve can actually give them the best chance of succeeding, men will take risks of adventure like that. But to jump into a female shark pool where you're crossing your fingers that the sharks will spare you, to me it's suicide. It's not a risk, it's just suicide.
Yeah, you don't find unicorns by jumping into the shark pool.
Yeah, and this romanticism, men have adopted the female way of looking at love and romanticism and coupling with women. And guys have questioned me how I can be with a female and have a girlfriend. And a lot of them are scared of being with a woman on her terms only. And if they get with a woman and start enjoying time with her, that's it. They start feeling something and all bets are off. They've disappeared and they're just going to be a puppet on the string until she gets rid of them in the dumpster.
You know what? If anything truly aggravates me with men, it's when they take that approach. Because what they're saying is, in no uncertain terms, I'm fucking weak. I can't be around a woman without getting turned into a poodle on a leash. I don't know how. Is the moment I feel anything for them, I become silly putty in their hands. And I've been preaching this for a long time, and I'll say it now, guys. That's your job, is to learn how to stand on your own. I mean, I see guys all the time, and I used to see them even more often in couples counseling, guys that had no skills whatsoever for arguing. They lose every argument with a woman, absolutely lose it within 5 minutes, and would get tongue-tied and not know how to defend themselves and not know how to stick to facts, because women could manipulate and game and guilt them and shame them into accepting responsibility for whatever mistakes were made, regardless of who actually did it.
And they can't trust their own instincts, even if they don't know the answers. Men just can't say no. And when women sort of pressure them, they feel like they have to explain it logically, but they kind of know that women, if they're stuck on they want their way to be the right way, they're just going to keep arguing it until you submit. So you're better off just saying no and I don't care. If you have an instinct of what you want to do, and even if it's based on your own feelings as a man, even though, say you probably should, I don't know, and I'm not saying just never say yes to a woman if you care about her, but I'm saying things that really are against your values. you have every right to sort of go, no, I'm not into this. And that's final. Like, and if a lot of these guys take a look at how much they allow women to foist their values on the relationship, and every guy is patient, every guy allows them their time. I mean, right from dating, a man waits until she says yes, a man waits until she'll sleep with him, a man will wait and be respectful of a woman's boundaries and limits, but the reverse isn't true, and men kind of think they're not entitled to it. And to me, it's always a two-way street.
Yeah, men need to be able to say, "There's the door." I mean, if you can't watch a woman leave, then you can't have agency in a relationship. It's just that simple.
I always felt uncomfortable hiding from fear. That was a big thing. I hate the feeling of feeling afraid. And slowly I realized the more I confronted the fear, whether it was women, whether it was saying no to them, but more importantly, just saying yes to what I wanted. You know, there's fears in every corner, depending on how you look at it. But the more you kind of get rid of the fear in your life, and a lot of it comes down to the language you speak to yourself and to the females in your life, and respectfully. It doesn't mean you have to tell them to fuck off. But there's nothing wrong with saying no, thank you, not yet, not for me. So, yeah, that's a big thing. And I think you've, in a lot of your videos, said that the mental health of a man is his degree to say sort of no to women. But what it implies is also you're saying yes to yourself.
Absolutely. And if I don't buy, I hate, of course, like any red pill guy, my eyes roll in the back of my head whenever somebody uses the term real man. My eyes roll so hard I have to do a wind up. But if I were to use that label, if I were to invest in the idea of what a real man is, I would say real men can say no.
And what we mentioned before, stop trying to cut down other men. I really see the guys who are competitive, this tournament reflex in the comment sections especially, and reactionary response videos that really want to decimate another content creator because they don't believe in what you believe. I think it sort of resides in that you don't really have many of your yeses, so you're just going to say no to everything that offends you. And the thing is, I'd say to guys, don't get on the internet with your sword out all the time. Keep your sword sheathed and go out there calm. Only get your sword out if you are personally attacked, because you can learn so much from others and add building blocks to what you think. So going back, for instance, say TFM and I are nothing alike, but I like the guy and we have great conversations because he's kind of got a strength in looking at the world in certain ways that I appreciate. You know, other ways other guys do. Other guys like the fun aspect, the attacking, blunt, fuck off attitude of him, right? But when I talk to him about sort of more deeper issues, he's full of information I wouldn't have thought of simply because he's not a carbon copy of me. But we're trying to speak rationally in a certain direction, even though neither of us are perfect. And he's got a wealth of information that sort of has helped me go, that's a way of looking at it. And then it spurs me on to thinking or refining a point of view of mine. And, you know, a lot of my videos, if you try and connect them, I've probably contradicted myself a lot, but I meander around kind of philosophical concepts and I enjoy chewing on ideas like gum to see what comes out of it. And I think you can't be too precious about that. I can laugh at myself and go, oh, fuck me. Yeah, you're right. Those two things contradict each other. So what I'd say is, a lot of guys, what sort of disappoints me in the comment section, I realize people are hurt. I realize people are latching onto answers, but stop going on there with your sword out, and especially stop trying to stab people, mentors and people who don't wish you any ill, that only have an opinion. It amazes me that the people that are attacked are people who have been there the longest. And I know they're easy targets, but they've produced a body of work that is known for a reason. So I don't understand. I do understand, but it just irritates me. Anyway, I went off topic a bit, but that's something that annoys me.
I hope those guys listen to you. I'm not holding my breath. And in the end, I really think they probably need to be doing what they're doing at the time. We can only hope that it's, just what they need to do at that moment, and that perhaps down the road they can sheathe that sword.
Yeah.
And start absorbing things from a different perspective. I understand totally what you say. I think those guys are always going to be part of our community because, just like Zen priests used to say, we're dealing with the walking wounded.
Yeah.
That's always going to be a part of this community.
It's almost like you a guy hard on his luck. You kind of saying, "Here, man, come and stay with me," and then you come home and he's sold half your furniture. He's punched holes in the wall, and it's like, oh man, come on, I can only kind of have patience for this for so long.
And then he says, well, you asked me to come in.
Well, what did you expect me to do when you had beer in the fridge?
Yeah, I got drunk and punched holes in your walls.
Something I wanted to ask you was what, because I really knew you or started to follow you through An Ear for Men, which I really like, because you're talking one-on-one with somebody. That's the impression I get. What do you get out of that you couldn't get out of, say, the MRA or any other avenue that's come before that you've been involved with? What's because you've mentioned to me that you like doing An Ear for Men a hell of a lot. What do you get from that you couldn't, or even from your therapy, even to say that? What do you get from that?
Well, that's a great question. And I think and what you're talking about is the difference between AVFM and An Ear for Men.
Yeah.
AVFM is about talking to a community of men. And everything I do at An Ear for Men, I ask myself, because I very much had a father like yours. He was there. He was a damaged product of 2 wars. So I didn't get a lot of interaction with him. He was a very distant figure, although his masculine traits were in the house, and that did a lot of good. But I always imagine, what did I want my father to say to me? Looking back at my life now, and as a 61-year-old man, getting ready to be 62, I think about growing up, what would I have liked to have heard? Other than what I did hear, because what I got from my father about women was bullshit. He was a white knight, and I'm not saying that to put the man down. I love him dearly, but that it is what it is. He didn't have any kind of red pill understanding, and if you go through the comments, and this is almost an embarrassment, and it may sound like bragging, and maybe it is a little bit, but the highest flattery that I get and I see in my comments is from men who are saying, you're like the father I never had. I want An Ear for Men. I want my work, what I'm dedicated to doing in my private practice counseling, in everything I do at An Ear for Men, is about mentoring men. It's about telling them what the world won't tell them, that they're valuable, that they not only have a right to say no, they have an obligation to say no. They have a responsibility to do it and to hold their own feet to the fire. But mainly importantly, tell them that all these messages of their worthlessness and how they don't matter unless they're making a woman smile, those are messages we get a million fucking times by the time we're 4, right? It is a constant drum of this. And so I wanted to create something that told men the counter narrative to all the bullshit they're fed that diminishes them, that reduces their value in their own minds, in their own eyes, and to have a place for them to go listen to something that's affirming for them and that reminds them that they're worth a shit. uh, instead of what they're being told, and have that be a very personal, almost like one-on-one conversation, not speaking to large groups or anything. But I hope that my audience gets, each individual man, that I am talking to him individually about his life. And doing that makes me feel great. I love the work I do there much more than I ever liked the work at A Voice for Men.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you and I have a similar perspective. I get in terms of like being able to communicate to a group, which is almost impossible because everyone's so individualistic. They've got different upbringings, different experiences, different responsibilities in life, different fears, different personality traits. So it's hard. It's like trying to get 1,000 cats to agree to walk in one direction. Not that I'm trying to, but yeah, I get much more satisfaction. Like you said, I call it, I make my videos for myself. For me, it's a journal speaking to a younger version of me, but it's no different than you're saying you're speaking, from the voice of what you wish you would have gotten from a father, and I
It's the same thing.
I can relate to that too.
Well, I had an advantage in that, in the dysfunctional dynamics of my family lent me to being the role of the family scapegoat, which predisposes me to argue with everything. It was actually came more naturally for me. Of course, my father was gone a lot. He was career military. He was in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and was stationed in different places overseas. And we didn't always travel with him, couldn't always travel with him. So, yeah, I was primarily raised by a woman. My father was around a fair amount, though. And my life became one where it was, argue, defend yourself, or perish. And some family dynamics lend that to people. Other people, they're in a different role in the family, and they really don't get an opportunity to hone their skills, and they have to do it as an adult. But I was playing Perry Mason in my own house by the time I was 15, with my mother and my father. So it was, I called it a somewhat abusive situation. They would probably call it career development.
Yeah, it's hard at this part in your life to go. In some ways, I'm grateful because now I have a stronger resolve. But fuck, I don't know if I needed it. It's kind of like the person who's a traditionalist and he's happy and he's got a wonderful traditional family life that he believes in wholeheartedly. I can sit there and call him apathetic and he's blind to the truth, but I can't deny that his life works for him. So, if my life turned out differently, if I had different lessons, if I had a more traditional girlfriend when I was in my early 20s that was more in line with my values, then who's to say where I'd be right now? It's funny when you think about if the dominoes fell in a different way, how you and I would both be at this point and whether or not we'd actually be talking. But
Absolutely. Family has a lot to do with that for all of us.
Yeah, and the fact that and it annoys me sometimes when they laugh at the word masculinity now because it's been relegated to some clownish ancient vaudeville act, or it's something you can't even utter it now because the reaction is to laugh at it and roll your eyes. But it was actually something that was akin to saying just man and woman back in the past. And masculinity is almost like a process. It's a revealing, it's a finding. And I think there's a core of that in guys who are searching for their own way and trying to find some sort of footing in life today that makes sense. Because masculinity was taught through mentorship of guys just speaking openly about being men in public. But now more and more with the censorship, even that's like the last refuge of men mentoring each other is online here. Even that's being strangled and will probably be eliminated. So I'm just kind of really worried about the guys coming up with nothing but frustration, anger, and hatred, having no mentorship and being just a pressure cooker. how are you going? There's not much good stuff that's going to eventuate from men like that. And if it does, it'll be completely accidental. It won't be purposeful, you know?
Right.
In the past, there was actually some process of like passing on of some sort of mentorship. Even if your father was different to your uncle or grandfather, they would still provide, because the fact that they were your father, they would be, like you said, offering you the advice, the little kernels of truth they learnt through chance and mistake. They would be offering it to their son, because sure as hell don't want their own son stepping on a landmine. And so that's how positive sort of male teachings were put forward. And the loss of that to me is, I don't have a dog in the race because I don't care about propagating the species, but I find it interesting that, and I don't know if you find this, that the guys like you and I who don't really care about marriage or the traditional path, I see it in public that I'm more respectful in public of people's decorum and respect of each other, even in traffic, letting people through. You know, don't walk in front of me, stand to the left of an escalator, let someone pass through. I seem to be aware and give people room and act more respectful than increasing traditionalists do and increasing leftists and traditionalists do. It's a really strange thing. I don't believe in all the things you guys are mouthing. I'm actually believing all the opposite. I don't believe in handing out. I don't believe in being kind or raising my values above you. If you're a piece of shit, then I'll treat you like a piece of shit. But if I won't raise my values above yours. But in public, I'm always aware of it, and I'm always trying to be respectful and courteous, but they don't. I find it interesting.
Well, I have the same exact experience. I really, and my girlfriend said something about this the other day. She said, if people only knew, because I try to be as polite as possible to everybody I meet, and as cordial and friendly as possible, in a world where that's increasingly not valued. And her impression was that was somewhat different than the impression of my work might leave.
Yeah, but that's people's interpretation. I always say that.
And that's my work. And then out there in the world, I'm just me. I'm not the guy on YouTube.
And I always actually say to some guys I talk to, I go, I would guarantee, not 99%, almost 100% guarantee that some of these guys that are really hateful and want to damage and destroy you online and ruin your reputation, I'm certain that if I was able to just chat with them in a bar, if I was talking to them in a bar rather than online, I would be able to get along with them. We would laugh and joke and even swear at each other and say, fuck you, but it would be like sport. We wouldn't hold a grudge and we wouldn't hate each other. We could have a laugh about it, but because there's that loss of masculinity as well, everything online is very, very feminine. Even the way people interpret messages, it's like I'll give my point of view on something, right? And then you'll hear comments like, so you're saying that I should blah, blah, blah. It's like, fuck, when did I say you should do anything? It's like, they're just ready.
It's like arguing with a girl.
Yeah, they've got the hammer out, the offense hammer, and they're ready to smash it wherever they see room. As soon as the nail of opportunity arises, they want to smash it with their hammer.
And then the threat of I'm going to dox you, whatever that comes up online, all purely relational aggression, very female. Very female.
Okay, finally, I wanted to know if you wanted to plug anything, tell people about where they can find you and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah, I'm at An Ear for Men channel on YouTube, of course. You can also find some of my work at avoiceformen.com. For people that would like to support my work, I'm on Patreon, but since Patreon is recently on an anti-free speech SJW tear, kicking Sargon Akkad off. I also heard Milo got booted. I'm not sure if that's true, but I have started, and I'll provide you a link if you wouldn't mind giving it to people, an account at subscribestar.com.
I got to do that too. Yeah.
It's an alternative way to support. But those are the ways to reach me. I've been banned for life from Twitter, so you can't reach me there. But you can reach me through my websites. No problem.
Yeah, well, thanks, Paul. It was a great chat. I hope the guys listening got something out of it. Remember, it's just our opinion. Chew on it. If you don't like it, throw it out. If you do, chew on it yourself and see what comes out. So thanks again. We'll do it again, Paul. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
If you want to say thanks, feel free to subscribe, donate, comment, link, like, share, and hit the bell icon below this video. Thanks to all my subscribers and supporters who keep me making videos. I really appreciate it. Cheers, guys.